Some tales are about witches and monstrosities. Some are about noble knights in shining armor. But not this one.
They've taken everything from me. Now, I will have it back.
Meve, the Queen of Lyria and Rivia, the White Queen, a leader unafraid to join her soldiers on the battlefield, a great proponent of equality between the races. She was a beautiful woman, with hair so light it looked more grey and nearly white, although she was not necessarily very old at the time. She ruled her lands expertly, even when her late husband was still alive. It was clear who held the true power at court. Meve was unlike many others, quite like Calanth of Sintra actually, whom she was good friends with. Her husband constantly cheated on her with their maids of honor. Her sons were, by her own account, even dumber than her already pretty dumb husband. It's good that she was around to rule, with wisdom and cunning. And for this reason, her fellow monarchs often looked to her for counsel. She saw solutions where others saw none. During the meeting at Haga Castle between the monarchs of the north, where they discussed what to do about Nilfgaard's threat, Henselt was convinced they could just sit and wait for Nilfgaard to act. And Meve was the one level-headed enough to note that, even if the north just waited for Nilfgaard to do something, that wouldn't benefit the north so much as it would Nilfgaard. In the north, civil war was already at hand, against the non-humans. Rumors were spreading that those living on Nilfgaardian land had a better life. Nilfgaard can just wait it out for the north to devour itself. During this same meeting, once the kings had no idea what to do anymore, they all looked to Meve for answers. And so it was Meve who suggested they do something drastic to shake up Nilfgaard and show them who's boss, much like she would do to assert herself within her own court. And this then, of course, turned into, let's start a war with Nilfgaard. With this solution, only one problem remained: Sintra. Foltest insisted that Sintra should be taken during the war, and Meve, observant as always, believed Foltest might be fishing for Sintra to become a vassal state under Temeria. She suspected this was why he was so adamant about taking back Sintra, and she assured him that Sintra would never bow to Foltest. The Sintrians would have their homeland back, independent of any other realm. As if that wasn't enough, she then accuses him of wanting to find Ciri so he could marry her and take Sintra that way. Unsurprisingly, a bit of bickering erupts, and the conversation quickly turns to Meve as well. She has 2 sons, of course, but she doesn't seem to like them very much. At this point, she doesn't even know where they are. Presuming they haven't been brought to the gallows yet, she doubted that either would ever desire to be kings. And of course, as mentioned, her sons were both very, very stupid. The kings consider simply killing Ciri as well so she doesn't fall into the wrong hands, those of Emhyr, which Meve opposes vehemently. Infanticide? Meve grimaced. An ugly solution, my kings. Unworthy, and surely unnecessarily drastic. First of all, let us find the girl, because we still don't have her. And when we have found her, give her to me. I'll keep her in some castle in the mountains for a couple of years, and marry her off to one of my knights. When you see her again, she will already have 2 children and a belly out here. Leading to, if I count correctly, at least 3 future eventual pretenders and usurpers. Vizimir nodded. No, Meve, it is ugly indeed, but the lion cub, if she has survived, must now die for reasons of state. Gentlemen. The rain hammered against the windows, the gale howled among the towers of Haga Castle. The kings grew silent. Not long after, the Second Northern Nilfgaardian War starts, with Meve accusing Nilfgaard of provoking them. Even though, of course, it was the other way around. And things then moved fast. Nilfgaard immediately moved a massive army across the border. one that had been collected in Dol Angra for weeks, months even. The Lyrian border fortresses were destroyed, and Rivia, though prepared for months of siege, surrendered after just 2 days under the demands of the merchants and guilds. After the surrender of Rivia, Nilfgaard continued north, facing almost no resistance. Demavend and Meve didn't stand much of a chance. They were pulling their soldiers back because they could not create a line to begin the decisive battle. When the Nilfgaardians broke through all the way to Aldersburg, to prevent a blockade, Demavend and Meve decided to go to battle. The kingdoms of Edirn and Lyria could barely muster up 3,000 cavalry and 10,000 footmen, and about a fifth was cut off from the battle during the first days, stuck in besieged outposts and fortresses. Menno Cohorn, the Nilfgaardian commander, then threw an army of 13,000 strong at them. The Nordlings were massacred and local commoners were used as slaves to collect whatever valuable loot could still be gathered, before the lands of Rivia and Lyria were burned to the ground in an effort to ruin the northern economies even after the war was over. At this point, the fate of Queen Meve was unknown. Her country was in shambles, taken by Nilfgaard, burned to ashes. Henselt had not come to Demavend and Meve's aid. He had broken their agreement as allies. Meve, no doubt, was furious, and she was not quite ready to lay down and die. She gathered what forces she could, including mercenaries and ordinary bandits, and started a guerrilla war behind enemy lines. The locals called her the White Queen, reminiscent of a perverted form of Ithlinne's prophecy, which told that white chill will come to be, and after it the white light, and then the world will be reborn through the white flame and the White Queen. Which would be apt, as in this case, the White Queen fights the White Flame, and you can be sure they reform the world. And this is how Geralt and his Hanse finds Meve and her guerrillas, also called Meve's Crowd, while they were looking for Ciri. They had just grabbed the only boat available between the two banks of the Yaruga, when on one side the Lyrian-Rivian guerrillas appeared, and on the other, Nilfgaard. The guerrillas wanted the boat to get their queen to safety. Nilfgaard wanted to kill the guerrillas, of course, and Geralt and his just wanted to get out of there. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, they desperately pedaled their way to a bridge, crossing the Yaruga, assaulted from both sides by arrows. Just before they reached the bridge, they realized that Meve's army was equally stuck between two fires. Nilfgaard was, of course, approaching from the right bank, but now also from the left bank, from the forest, in much greater force. Complete chaos ensued. Everyone jumped overboard, and Milva, who was pregnant, miscarried in the midst of battle. Due to this, Geralt couldn't flee, even though Nilfgaard was chasing the Lyrian guerrillas over the bridge at this point. Meve's army was losing this battle. And so, instead of fleeing as well, Cahir opted to fight alongside them, against Nilfgaard, to buy Milva time. And without going into too much detail, that's a story for another time, Geralt and Cahir together turned the tide and won Meve the day. Nilfgaard was driven back, at least on the right bank, as Meve and hers, with Geralt and Cahir's help, had crossed the bridge, which was subsequently destroyed, and thus the Nilfgaardians on the left bank were left staring at their feet with an upset look on their face, unable to follow the Nordlings. Afterwards, Meve, the queen herself, paid Geralt a visit. During the fight, Meve had stood in the first line of battle, and she had been wounded as well. A terrible wound now covered her face, straight across her mouth. It had knocked out several of her teeth as well, though she assured Geralt that the wound would not permanently disfigure. That remained to be seen, of course. Speaking at the moment was quite difficult, however, and she asked Geralt what his name was and where he was from. So Geralt then told her, this time truthfully, as he was sick of lying, that he was Geralt, just Geralt. Not his self-chosen of Rivia, but Geralt of nowhere. Meve asked him to kneel before her, and on that day she knighted Geralt and, as he had held the bridge alongside the soldiers of Rivia, named him, officially, Geralt of Rivia. Geralt and his Hanse then spent some time traveling with Meve and her army until they decided that this probably wasn't the best idea, given that they were all wanted, and after some time, Meve's army also chose to travel towards Mahakam, to fight Nilfgaard there, of course. Geralt didn't want to go to Mahakam, so naive as he was, he requested leave from the army and was of course denied, reminded coldly of his duties to the crown. However, Geralt and his band of misfits weren't quite ready to serve Queen Meve any longer, and so they slipped away like thieves in the night, leaving Meve quite furious, as not only had they left, they'd also stolen quite a bit of provisions along with some horses. Thankfully, Meve's luck was about to change for the better once more. When the joint northern kingdoms won their battle at Brenna against Nilfgaard, Demavend of Eddern and Henselt, the Snake, decided to join forces at last, and they were soon joined by Meve and her guerrilla squads as well. Together, they slowly but surely took back their lands, and it wasn't long before all the monarchs of the north were called to Sintra for peace talks, including Meve, of course. During this meeting, she was the one to bring up the matter of Sintra itself, because everyone else was too scared to talk about it. Unfortunately, that matter had already been solved, of course. Sintra would remain Nilfgaardian territory, as Emhyr had married the fake Ciri at this point, and Meve, again, was one of the only people present, outside of Esterad Thyssen, who realized by looking at the fake Ciri's portrait that this was in fact not Ciri, noting that she was quite unlike Calanthe, or Rugner, or Pavetta. But at the same time, she also realized that, for reasons of state, she must be Ciri. We don't meet Meve in the game, unfortunately, though we do meet one of her very dumb sons, who is very dumb indeed to challenge a Witcher in single combat. But we'll assume she's still around somewhere, perhaps in Castle Rivia, the winter residence of the monarchs of Lyria, mourning her cousin Foltest's death and musing on whether she'd ever get to see a live unicorn. Although it seems she'll return to war once more in Thronebreakers, we'll see if she finds her unicorn yet.